Hello, this is Drake Lundström, outbound chair of 6690, and I'm going to be going through the presentation on our language learning process. I actually tried to film giving this presentation to students, and it's a lot more fun with people in the room, but the audio came out a little bit weird because just how the phone was set up. So I'm going to take another shot and just do it by myself on Zoom. If you want to see how this really looks, that presentation is going to be a bit more accurate or reflection. It's also important to note that while this is kind of the big language learning process presentation, the students have been sent an email before this with some reading for them to do and other videos to watch in advance to kind of prepare for this. And it's also been talked about once or twice in the informational sessions leading up to this. For like we spelled out the basics of the program, what the requirements would be in basic cost. To parents during our informational sessions, at the interview weekend, and so on. So while a lot of this is new, it's not totally a first exposure to this. So let's get into it. Okay, there we go. So now I'm just going to give this presentation as if I was giving it to the students. So also any future students watching this or catching up on things, let's learn about language. So the amount of you can learn your language while you're abroad in the other country. However, the amount of language you speak day one when you arrive is the single biggest determinant of your outcome on youth exchange. That's not to say, it's the single biggest correlator with it. So does that mean you will always have a bad exchange if you have poor language skills? No, but it does affect your exchange a lot. So as much as possible, we're going to try to improve that. So this is from a survey of lots of exchange students, and you can see how it affects their various outcomes. So students rate how much they value the exchange more if they have better language, less if they have poor language. They rate their host families higher because it's hard to really have a good relationship with your host family if you can't talk to them. They have a much higher rating of club support because it's hard to ask for help when you can't ask for things. And the biggest one is school experience. So this is about a 400% increase in how well students rate their school experience. Because if you have some language coming in, you can actually participate and do things and get involved, where students with poor language will often just sit there and do nothing during the school day. So that's really one of the big things. Although it kind of correlates, but if you have poor language, you still can get involved in school. It just takes more effort on your part. So there are still students with poor language do well in school. So you can still do that. So don't just give up if you have poor language. Here are a couple testimonials from some of our past students in my district. So them talking about the language preparation. It has saved my exchange effectively. I am the most isolated exchange student in Poland. No exchange student lives within 40 kilometers of me. Being able to speak even a smattering of Polish has made it viable for me to ask people to hang out and have fun, especially in lieu of having no other exchange students. My host parents speak no English either. My ability to speak decent Polish is my lifeline here. It's pretty self-explanatory, although that was from our 2-month in survey, so it doesn't even capture what happened later on Ethan's exchange, where he ended up almost getting sent home, and his ability to talk to his family Rotary Club and kind of work through issues is the reason why he didn't. You guys can pause and read this if you want to read the other two quotes verbatim. So it's also worth pointing out to you guys that our program works. I don't want you to put you to a program that doesn't have good results. So this is some fun data. How well could you speak the language when you were assigned your country? So a 1 is you can't even say hello. And a 10 is perfectly fluent. This is how well students could speak when they were assigned the country versus how well they could speak when they arrive in the host country. So our program is not perfect. I'm not promising that we're going to get you from 0 to fluent with our program, but it is a pretty significant shift towards the middle and upper range. This also includes some data from our old Pimsleur-based program, and our new Italki-based program has been more effective. So I hope this will be an even more dramatic shift in the future. For example, Pimsleur really didn't help students already at a high level improve at all, where Italki has helped students at a high level improve further. Okay, and then this is my favorite graph. How were your language skills relative to other exchange students in your host country when you arrived? That's really the big one, which is because you don't have it's like that joke about putting when two campers are attacked by a bear and one starts putting on his shoes, because you don't have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than the other camper. You don't have to be perfect. No one expects perfection. You just have to be better at speaking the language than the standards in the minds of the Rotarians and your host family people around you. So you don't have to be perfect. And right now we are pretty solidly schooling the competition. Although I hope that as this program spreads, we start becoming average, because everybody will do a great job of it. That's the eventual goal. But for now, if someone started at level 0, they didn't speak a word of the language, they will usually end up in around the middle of the pack, to a couple of them even more at the top of the pack. For students that spoke any of the language, they are going to be one of the best students speaking the language in their district. So pretty effective. Here's a big one. Is language learning automatic? People think that it is. It is not. I had a friend or a coworker at a previous job that they had lived in Japan for 10 years. They had a Japanese child, they had a Japanese wife, they had a Japanese child, and they were able to speak less than, I want to say, 200 words of Japanese. If you don't put in the effort, you will never get there. When you are in youth exchange, you're in a situation where a lot of the effort's outside of your control. You don't decide to study, so it feels automatic. It's not actually automatic, though. It's kind of being in that situation forced into it. And if you take deliberate steps, you can do even better than just kind of, going with the flow. Here is what we have found to be kind of the keys to successful language learning. First, reasonable. Second, accountable. Third, effective, in that priority order. Reasonable. What does that mean? That means that I don't want to assign you a class that costs $1 million or that takes 60 hours a week for 5 months or something like that. If no matter how good the class is, like if this class downloaded perfect French into your brain, but it costs $10 million, it's still worthless to us because it's unreasonable. I'm not going to expect you to pay $10 million. So that's kind of the first thing, is I want a program that is reasonable for our students to do. It's not a crazy commitment. It's a bit of one, because everything is, but not a crazy commitment. Our program is 1 hour a week on average, which is, you waste more than an hour a week on video games or social media or other dumb stuff, or everybody wastes at least an hour a week on something. And I just want one of those hours back. It's pretty affordable. This presentation doesn't go into too much detail of cost, but usually it's for the whole program runs usually about $180 to $300, and we give you $100 gift card to cover the first bit of that. So for about what the students and parents are paying, think $80 to $200. And you can study ahead. So that's the other big one. So you have to be at an hour a week average. So at week 2, there's a check-in, and you have to be at 2 hours. At week 4, check-in, have to be at 4 hours. Week 6, 6 hours. But you can do all 15 hours in your first 5 weeks, and I'm totally happy with that. In fact, I prefer that a little bit, because I'd recommend starting with like 2 to 3 hours for your first few weeks and kind of build up a buffer, so I don't complain later when you don't hit your goals, especially when midterms or spring break or finals, other things come up. You're going to miss a week or two. So having a buffer from studying a couple hours a week for the first 2-3 weeks will really put you in a good spot. Okay. Accountability is one of the really big things that we found, because a bunch of people in the world want to learn languages and never do, because they don't have a strong driver, a strong motivator, like holding them to task. For example, I want to speak Swedish. I have not gotten that far in my Swedish, if I'm being honest. In fact, this year I've started again. I'm doing better because I have a wedding that I'm attending in Sweden in June, and that's pushing me because I have a I have a deadline that I'm working towards. I have a goal. I have some reinforcement there. And the goal is not for us to be, some harsh taskmaster, like checking every hour of the day, like, hey, are you doing enough work? Are you going hard enough, yelling at you, screaming at you? That's not the goal. I don't think that's very effective here. I also think it's a waste of wateritarian's time. The goal is for a more relaxed accountability. We're going to check in once every 2 weeks. And if you're not at target, the question is going to be, why are you not at target? What do you need? How can you achieve your target next time? So that kind of more positive, relaxed vision is what I'm going for. Although, you know what? If you keep missing your language targets, this is one of the ways we evaluate you as an exchange student. So you could not go on exchange, but normally trying to keep it more positive and trying to, focus on the great things that are happening from learning a language, not just, threatening you every week, because that wouldn't be fun. Then we're getting to effectiveness. So fun thing about effectiveness, who learns better, kids or adults? Everybody says kids, and they are wrong. So kids learn better at the absolute, you want to be a totally native speaker with no accent, perfect grammar, kids do better. But if you're talking about like short to medium term, adults dramatically beat kids. Like if you put a 6-year-old or like a 15 or 50-year-old in a country, that 6-year-old is going to take a lot longer to have medium complexity conversations than that 15-year-old or than that adult. That adult is going to be able, they're not going to have to learn concepts like the word, like if you wanted to learn the word abstract in Japanese, a 6-year-old have to learn, what does abstract mean? An adult can just learn the word abstract. They're also kind of less constrained by rigid structures that kids are. So that's kind of how even exchange students that don't speak any of the language on arrival usually are able to have decent conversations in 3 months, where kids can't really have complicated conversations for, I don't know, the first 7-8 years usually. The kind of, and that's also important to know, because when we're looking at effectiveness, we need to look at how adults learn. Some programs are based around teaching adults like kids, but adults don't learn like kids. And that's what, there's some really neat research on this. If you are a nerd like me, I could recommend a book or two, but I'm not going to recommend academic books to you yet. If you want to, some, email me. So children learn with a structured approach. This was originally popularized by Chomsky, I believe, and essentially they take whole sentences and repeat them, and without knowing what they're saying even, and eventually through a bunch of different complete sentences, complete structures, they then derive meaning and break things down and understand more. If you've ever been around little kids, they just repeat things without knowing what they're saying. They'll just repeat like whole phrases. So with adults, it's very different. Adults care about meaning. They don't care about the path to the meaning. So an example of the difference in this would be a conversation. So see that waiter, or not waiter, that flight attendant pouring coffee. So he's walking along. I say, hey, and he says, empty. That was a conversation. You understood what transpired there. Like, I asked for coffee. He said, sorry, the pitcher's empty right now. But there was no structure there at all. And that's kind of how adults work with conversations. If anything, they try to avoid preset structures because they find them cliche. If you want to learn even more about, probably should have this in different order. I might revise this later. So also, actually, sorry, never mind. This is why I have this here. So Ultra Learning is a book about how to learn things better. I really highly recommend it. It's helped me tremendously, doubled or tripled my learning speed. I've read more than it now, but if you wanted an intro to how to learn well, that's the book, and it has a whole like stuff on language specifically. Beyond that, this is where we kind of go over the requirements of the pre-reading that our students were doing. So they had an article, couple mini documentaries, a TED Talk, and then 46 minutes of an example tutoring session that they watch. And at this point, I would quiz them and say, hey, what did you learn from this article? What was your favorite part of the documentary? What did you learn from the TED Talk? what surprised you with the demo session, things like that. Kind of, I'm not going to ask you to write an essay on everything I assign, but if you watch it, I expect you to take something away from it. So kind of a couple questions like that are normally what I do at this point in the presentation. If you did read these, which if you haven't, stop and do, answer those questions. Like, what's something you learned? Did you find surprising in this, or what you really like? How did the TED Talk change your perception of language learning? And then, like, were you surprised how far we got in the demo with me learning Mandarin? Okay, so more on effectiveness. So tutoring is just better than other teaching. It's not teacher's fault. It's just one-on-one is more effective than 1-on-30. It's actually a thing in the teaching literature called the 2 sigma problem of education. And if you know your statistics, this means that if you took the average student and had them be tutored instead of be with a regular class, the average student being tutored would perform as well as the top 5% of students in a regular class. So tutoring will move a student from the middle to the top 5%. It makes things much more effective. There's actually a neat ongoing study from a professor. He puts his stuff on comparelanguageapps.com. He's been doing it for, I think, over 10 years now, I think since 2008, where he looks at different language apps and sees how effective they are. And what he found is that Italki users, that is one-on-one tutoring, the program that we use, on average needs 19 hours to complete the requirements for a college semester of Spanish. A college semester of Spanish is 68 hours plus homework. So you could spend 68 hours plus homework or 19 hours with Italki. And I know which of those that I will pick. And the thing is, it's not like, and this is a cool advantage that we get, because normally the reason people don't do tutoring is because it's more expensive. But in our situation, it actually ends up being more affordable usually to do tutoring because of the online nature of it and how many people speak languages. So there's some other really cool benefits of tutoring. One is cultural questions. You get to ask people, hey, what do they do in your country? Like, an example would be things don't translate exactly. In Sweden, a really good compliment for food would be, that's not bad. Which in English is not a great, nice thing to say about someone's food, but in Swedish, it is. So if you plug that translation directly into Google Translate, you're not going to understand it. But when you actually hear it with a tutor, they will explain, oh, this sounds like it's not a compliment, but it is. Or in Japanese, if you put in goodbye in Google Translate, you might get sayonara, but not understand that sayonara means like final goodbye, like I'm never gonna see you again, where you wouldn't say that to just say bye-bye. You also get to work on accents. So you get to pick specifically a tutor from the region you're planning to be in. Another big one is swearing. I expect all of my exchange students to learn how to swear before they go abroad. Yes, that sounds funny, I know, but the reason for it is, if you don't learn how to swear before you go abroad, you will learn how to swear when you are abroad. You just won't know you learned it because people will tell you that, like, you're asking for a menu when you're actually asking for various explicatives. So I do expect you to ask about swear words because people will try to get you to say them because they think they're really funny. So you want to know them in advance so you don't accidentally say them. So yeah, so that's some of the other kind of stuff you get from tutoring. It's more than just a repeat back and forth. With a Pimsleur course, that it's not targeted at you. You can actually get other interesting things. You also get a really big benefit with spacing in our program. So we have done language boot camps at some point in the past, and the problem is cramming doesn't really work. The further that you space out or when you space out things that you're learning, you will retain it for longer. So you see kind of the more repetitions over time that you do, the slower the memory is forgotten. This is a very well-studied effect. It's really cool. And it's once again part of the reason cramming doesn't work. The other big one is that a lot of the learning for language is time to process and kind of come to terms with what you learned. That was a weird way to say it, but it makes sense. If you spent 8 hours a day learning a new language, you're just not gonna get, not all 8 hours are going to be effective. The first one, this second one, then you're just going to like not be able to fit more things in your head at once. But doing it like, oh, 2 hours a week, having lots of time to process, and you're coming to each hour totally fresh and ready to learn. That doesn't mean, oh, you should never study more than like an hour a week. More hours is more helpful up until the point like you get a headache and need a break. But if you had 100 hours, it would be better to spend it 10 hours over 10 weeks versus 100 hours in 2 weeks. So to the degree that you can space things out, it's usually a better idea, which is why we're doing this slow paced program over 15 weeks rather than like one big intense boot camp right before you go. Sub-skills and knowledge transfer. This is a really big one. So people think of skills as one big thing, like, oh, I can speak Spanish, but it's not actually one big skill. It's actually a lot of really little skills. For example, the skill of being able to think of words similar to the word that you wanted when you don't know it. The skill of being able to parse different accents. The skill of being able to translate words in real time both ways. The skill of like knowing the vocab in a given area, the skill of conjugation, like all this various stuff, and also unconjugating, which all this stuff is sub skills and they don't transfer at all, which is the weird thing where it's like, hey, watching soccer doesn't actually teach you soccer, is what the picture is trying to show. But this is true in a lot of other areas. So if you are doing Spanish class and you are learning how to read and write and you're repeating back and forth pre-scripted conversations, you are not learning how to have unscripted free-form conversations where you're going to get thrown vocab you're not expecting. I've had students with like 5 years and they're in like finished AP French and they can't have a conversation in French, that they're not like prepared for that exact conversation in advance. So that's why we want to go for the real thing. So do as close to the real thing as possible, and you will actually run into all those tiny sub skills you don't know exist. So with language, your goal is to be able to speak and listen and have conversations. That's the main thing people think of when they think of fluency. So do that. Do your conversations from the first week, from day one. Once you have done the big real thing, then you realize what little skills you're missing in that, and then you can drill them. So a really common one that you'll find with language is a lack of vocab, just because you need to know enough words to like have a conversation. So first you try to actually have conversations, you realize you're missing some words, go learn more words, come back and more conversations back and forth. And the other thing is that you can target just the vocab that is necessary for you. Instead of learning all the vocabs, you learn the vocab that's relevant to your situation. Like, my mom's a graphic designer, my dad's an entrepreneur. I'm trying to think of something else. I was in marching band and theater. Like, those are the vocab words that I had to learn for myself, but they're not necessarily the vocab words that I learned in school. Like in school, I don't think I ever learned the word entrepreneur. But I had to learn it. I had to say it all the time in Brazil. So that's kind of the thing, is drill the vocab list that is necessary for you. Like Pimsleur was teaching students how to order beer. You're exchange students. You're not ordering beer. Please don't get sent home. Yeah, so I think that's, yeah, so you drill that, drill to find a weakness and focus on the vocab list specific to you. Okay, sweet. Next one, bust to the surf. If you guys stopped and saw the presentation before, you would know what this is an image of, and I would ask you to explain it. Since you probably should just stop watch the TED Talk, and then come back here because I stole a bunch of stuff from Scott Young, and that is one of his TED Talks. But I'll just go through it anyways. So essentially, if you're trying to get into the ocean, being in the waves crashing over you is kind of uncomfortable and wet, like cold and sucks. But once you're out past in this reef, into the big, out past the sand break in the reef and into the open ocean, everything is flat and smooth and really pleasant to swim in. How does this relate to language learning? It's the same exact thing with conversation. If you just push through to the skill of having natural paced, fluid conversations, it starts to be really pleasant to learn language and speak and practice. If you are just like doing a bit of Duolingo every day and kind of getting into it and out of it and into it and out of it, not all the way in, you are going to be in this realm, like this region of pain and misery the whole time. And the truth is, you can bust through at any point. You don't need to like build up a bunch of sub skills and then go in. You, like my husband, he wanted to learn Portuguese. We're going to go visit my host family in Brazil. I spent 1 hour with him a week, and he spent 1 hour with another tutor a week. And he was speaking at a natural speed, natural pace in Portuguese within 4 weeks, within 8 hours of total lessons, speaking more fluidly than students after a year or two of Spanish. And everybody can do this. He's not special. I mean, he is very special, but he's not special for this reason. This is something everybody can do. This is something we're doing with all of our students, no matter the language. It is super achievable. And yeah, natural flow. This is our top priority goal, because once you can speak with a natural flow, it's a lot more fun to talk. When you're stuttering through things, it's really unpleasant. And then you avoid talking, and then you never get better. So our top priority before you go abroad is that you have a natural flow. You can have like a fluid conversation. So you get more practice in, because if you're talking 6 times as fast in a given hour, you get 6 times the practice. It also makes it more fun to speak with you, because hey, if you're really stuttering through, you're not that fun to talk to. No offense. If you're actually able to have a conversation where people aren't pausing every sentence to like repeat 3 times, it's more fun to talk to you. So this is the goal of our language course. It's not perfection. It's not fluency, like whatever that means. It is a natural conversation flow to really set you up for success when you hit the ground in the other country. Okay, how do we do that? No English. If you saw the mini documentary series, you would know that's what they did. They learned 4 languages in a year by just going to each country and speaking 0 English. I mean, as little as possible. Once in a while, like you're trapped and calling for help or something, you're okay. But really, for your first at least 3 months, you should not be speaking English. It's just like going dark. It's just as effective. You're going to use a dictionary, you're going to suffer, but you should do this. And it's the same exact thing that we're going to do here. We're just going to do it with the tutors. So when you are with your tutor for 15 weeks, 15 hours, did I have the 15 hours in here? I might not have put the requirement in here, but our requirement is 1 hour a week for 15 weeks. When you first sit down with your tutor, you get to speak a bit of English, which is you get to explain these 4 rules to them and yeah, let them know this is what you're doing. You're going to speak only the language you're learning, except like to say you need to go to the bathroom. You can ask to go to the bathroom in that language, but like if something really comes up, you can speak a little bit, or you can clarify a complicated grammar rule. You're going to use a dictionary and Google Translate to fill in the gaps you're understanding. So you don't know all the words. That's fine. That's expected. Use Google Translate. So if you're coming up to a new sentence, stop, use Google Translate, and the words you don't know, try to put it together, try to say the sentence. The tutor is going to correct you when you get it wrong. And then you're going to say it again. You're going to get the sentence right. And then you'll move on the conversation. But 5-10 minutes later, end of the conversation, come back and say the same sentence again without Google Translate. So that's kind of the thing, is you'll go through with Google Translate first, then come back and try to remember it without it. You are going to ask the tutor to write down lots of things that they're saying, because one, you want a copy of things to look at later if you're making your flashcards later. Two, you're going to put things in Google Translate. And three, it's like sometimes it's just easier to read things than to hear things, kind of to help you. And four, you're going to tell them this will be slow and awkward, and it's going to be really slow and awkward, let me tell you. But yeah, so just tell them, please be patient. If it's going to be slow and awkward, that's fine. Okay, task-based learning. So what are you actually going to talk about with your tutor? So a task-based learning method is a method of, instead of saying, oh, learn this grammar rule, oh, learn this vocab list, oh, learn whatever, instead we have a meaning-based task. Here is a real-world problem that you want to solve. For example, I want to introduce myself and like say what I do for work. So like, hi, my name is Drake. I'm a software developer. Or like, hey, I'm Drake. I've been writing code for 2 years. Or like, yo, dude, I'm Drake. I have I'm a I'm a software designer and have been for a couple of years. Like, you see how there's a bunch of different ways to, even though it's a little awkward, there's a bunch of different ways to solve the same meaning problem. Like, a lot of words in there didn't actually repeat. And that's the thing with task, is I don't care how you solve it. I care that you solve it. I have this at Google Doc links to a list of a bunch of tasks that we have, which are just common things that will come up real world in when you're on exchange. And this is a living list. I want it to keep growing, which is stuff like, oh, you're going to be asked about your parents. What do they do for work? You're going to need to explain how to get places. You're going to need to ask about how laundry works, how shower works. All these kind of things are going to pop up. So, and it's also when you're talking with a tutor, sometimes you just get to like a dead point and you just don't have things to talk about. These are conversation starters to keep it going. There are a lot of them. I expect you to try to get through all of them before you're done with the tutor. I expect you, in fact, to add more and start having more fun conversations that are like outside these tasks. Yeah, meaning's primary, solve real problem, and there are many right answers to each task. Okay, mandatory minimum mistakes. This is the concept that I've been trying to work on and explain. I think I'm happy with it at this point. So let's say that you want to get to natural level fluency in conversation. You will make 10,000 mistakes on the process, in the process of getting there. There is no way to avoid them. There is no getting around it. There is no path that has no mistakes. There is, however, a shortcut. And that shortcut is make the mistakes faster. That thing we showed that those no English lessons with your tutor, those conversations are a speed run to get as many mistakes in as possible, because you will mess up. You will mess up over and over and over again, and nobody cares. They're going to be so happy you speak anything. It's fine. You're going to mess up and no one's going to have a problem with it. However, that's for month 1, 2, 3. If you're messing up basic stuff a month like 7, 8, 9, like some students have gone home over this. It is a problem if you don't eventually get to the right language level. And some people they feel they're perfectionists and they're like, oh, I want to wait to speak until I speak correctly. That's not real. That's fake. There is no way to do that. You will mess up a lot. And the only way to get past it is to mess up anyways and just speak more and just get all your mess ups out of the way. If you don't want to mess up in the country, just do a lot more tutoring before you go. Otherwise, you're going to mess up and it's going to be fine. No one's going to care. So that's the thing. You will make mistakes. There is no way around it. Do not be afraid of mistakes. Embrace the mistakes. Okay. I believe this is just about, it's not the final thing, that's close to it. I want to keep improving our program. So for the students in our program, we're going to be requiring you to submit a video every 2 months ish of your progress in the language. So I want these to be real. So I don't want you to have a script. I don't want you to prepare. I want you to sit down, film yourself 2 to 5 minutes talking about whatever. So first say, hey, I'm Drake. I'm learning Portuguese. I've been tutored for like 10 hours now. And then you go into it. Um, so we'll do before any tutoring, halfway through, end of tutoring, and then like a couple months progress through your exchange. These will eventually go on YouTube, so don't swear, don't say you're breaking rules, whatever, just don't be stupid. Yeah, that's about it. I think that these are going to be helpful. So that documentary was really neat to people. So I think that kind of showing this is going to be really cool, like propaganda for the program. And it also will give people a realistic idea of what to expect. Because right now, I have heard what students sound like after 15 hours of tutoring, but nobody else has. So I want a real, like, hey, day one, you can see this student recording their video, and like the only thing they had to say is like, I don't speak a single word of Hindi. I looked up hello before I came in here, and that's it. To 2 months in, being able to stutter through some sentences, to 4 months in, being able to speak a couple sentences fluidly, to like then starting their and that's in tutoring, then starting their exchange in like 1-2 months, all of a sudden, boom, they're speaking like you wouldn't believe. So I'm excited about that. I sent a Google Drive link for people to drop their videos in. If anybody from other districts wants to share theirs, I would be more than happy to take them. And don't worry, I will not post them alone to YouTube and make you look bad by showing only your first video. I will be like splicing together a chunk of like a few of yours in a row to show your improvement. Okay, I think so. One other piece of feedback that I've gotten that I wanted to share, I just chopped this whole thing and threw it in here. You can pause and read it if you want, but I'll just pull out the important parts, which is I had a student who really wanted Japan as their first choice, and they did not get Japan. They got the Czech Republic. And there's a lot of really good things to say about the Czech Republic, but the Czech language is hard and almost nobody speaks it. And kind of he was feeling that this was like a waste of his time because he's not going to ever use Czech again. Like, what's the point of all this effort and work into it when it's not going to go anywhere? And then kind of being in the Czech Republic, what he realized is, let's see, there is much more to it than just learning the language. You also learn about the people and who they are, what they do. And now I found an interest in learning the language just to connect with the people. And that's what he wanted me to push. So I take feedback. I hope I take feedback well. So this is a big whole slide presentation about this is the language is not just about communicating. If you went to Finland, a lot of people speak English, you'd be fine without Finnish. But here's the thing. People are going to judge you all throughout your life, but especially on exchange. And they're not just going to judge what you say, but they're going to try to judge based off things that are harder to fake than your words, because it's easy to say the right words. Well, in the right, when you speak the language. Instead, they're going to try to judge you based off stuff that is really hard to fake. One of those that's hard to fake is actually speaking a language well. So with that said, they're going to use your ability to speak the language to say, do you care about the country? Do you care about being an exchange student? Are you a good exchange student? Like, how nice are you? Like, anything positive, they're going to be judging based on this. Like, are you friendly? Do they want to be around you? The language is going to be one of the single biggest barometers that people use to judge you on your exchange. Is this a lot of pressure? Yes, but I want to be honest about it. Like, there's a reason we're doing it is because it really matters. But here's the thing. The bar is so low. Like, especially if you look like me and you're in Japan and you can like order at a restaurant, people are like super happy. The bar is not that high. and it really lets people know you care about them. My husband, he went on a short-term exchange to Finland, so he didn't need to learn any Finnish, but he did, and that's what got his host grandparents to love him, because like he showed them that he cared. He didn't have to learn Finnish, and he did it anyways to connect with them. We had another student in Paraguay. So Paraguay speaks Spanish and Guarani, two official languages. So everybody spoke Spanish, but he actually went out and learned some Guarani. And that was really the thing that was like, oh, like you want to be a part of our culture. You really care about us. The language is so much more than just the words. I literally can't communicate how much it means. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it for like, I think we talked for like 4 or 5 minutes in the in-person presentation of just like how concepts literally don't translate across a language. And when you're studying a language, you need to like imagine you're actually a part of that country. And it's really cool. The people that are going on exchange, you don't get it yet. When you come back, you will, and you're gonna listen to this, you're gonna be like, yes. And that's all I can tell you is trust me, I've been where you are. You will like, I'm right. Just trust me. Okay. Next steps, if you were in my group in person, you would just be getting your country later today, because they did. Then you would schedule your first lesson before you leave the youth exchange weekend. Then you would study your phrase book, because you do study a phrase book for like 30 minutes or an hour before your first lesson. So you're not going in without knowing nothing. And yeah, then you're on the roll. I expect you to have 2 hours done in 2 weeks. And then Gavin did a sample of a first tutoring session learning Finnish. I have here on YouTube a sample of my first tutoring lesson learning Mandarin. And these are all linked on our YouTube channel. So yeah. Please reach out to me with any questions. I don't think my email is on this, but it's on other presentations, but it's drakelundstrom@gmail.com. So yeah, happy learning.